Good morning, everybody that's joining our new Trust Matters webinar. Welcome, everyone. Cameras are allowed to be on. We'd love to see everyone's faces. We're going to keep you guys on mute, though. We'll be starting shortly. It's just 11 o'clock, so why don't we get rolling here? Welcome, everybody, to our new Trust Matters webinar. Today's topic is 3 simple strategies to cultivate trust. Hosted by Noelle Mykolenko, who's our Chief Operating Officer here at Trust Advisor Associates. My name is Jason. I help out with marketing and a variety of different projects. So we're excited to get started. Tracy, I don't know if you want to wait 1 more minute to let some more people in, or all right, we'll get to the welcome and the rules and the guidelines. This is actually our 12th webinar in the series. On the bottom, there's the URL, trustedadvisor.com/webinars. You can see all the webinars in our series there, including the ability to watch videos of past webinars. After this webinar, we're going to email you links to the recording, the presentation, and a variety of educational resources to dig deeper into the materials. I'm very excited about this webinar. The content is fantastic that Noelle has assembled. So please, you can keep your cameras on if you want to show your face. We love being able to see people in this group. And we have some polls that will pop up throughout the webinar. And feel free to ask questions throughout the session. We'll have a couple breaks for questions and then have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for more questions. So thanks everybody for joining, and I will pass it over to Noelle to get started.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it. I know some folks are still starting, so while we're waiting for people to continue joining us, I just want to take a moment and address the recent events. I think that it's worth pausing for a moment and just to recognize the funeral for George Floyd is going to start in just under an hour in Houston, Texas. And over the last 2 weeks, I know at least we here in the United States have been seeing so much change and so much thoughtfulness and pain that's coming to the forefront around the racial injustice that we're experiencing here. Recently, it hasn't just been in the US. I saw that there are protests that have been occurring in 50 countries around the world, every continent with the exception of Antarctica. So it's clear that we're not alone in facing this crisis. And one thing that gives me hope, and I think it's pertinent to today's topic, is that a lot of people are pulling together in a sense of teamwork and being together as groups. And there's an element of what we're experiencing right now that's directly tied to trust and so much of what we talk about. We're all experiencing this very, very personally. We've been having conversations over the past week, Charlie Green and Andrea Howe and I, as the leadership team, about what our public position should be on the recent events. And I just want to let you know that we're going to be addressing it personally through the website and our blog posts. So you'll be able to hear about it or hear our perspectives on it there. If we could, let's just pause for a moment and recognize that there is so much happening and give a moment for the memory of George Floyd. I'm going to ask I'll just pause for about 15 seconds to reflect on that. Thank you for joining me and just thinking about what we've been experiencing. You know, it's always a struggle to make a transition from a conversation like that or a thought like that into the topic at hand for today. We are going to start in on the webinar. As Jason mentioned, today we're talking about how to cultivate trust in teams. I think that you'll see a lot of parallels to what we're experiencing culturally with what we're talking about creating trust in groups of people. So just as we get started, I'd like to take a quick poll. Jason's going to tee this up for you. And just to get a sense of why you joined this webinar this morning. Are you here primarily to learn about the warning signs of low trust? Are you looking for strategies to build trust in teams or to be maybe a more effective team leader? Maybe you just want to be a more effective team member. Go ahead and I'll give about 30 seconds. You should be able to vote real time and you can see the results as they're coming in. Wow, so overwhelmingly, we're looking specifically around those strategies to build trust in teams. And it looks like a large percentage of you are in team leadership positions. So good. So we'll get a better handle on what your experience is with teams later on in a separate poll. Okay. Excellent. So clearly, strategies to build trust in teams is what brought most of you here. So I'm going to go ahead and skew my timing a little bit. We'll spend most of our time then focusing on the strategies to build trust in teams. For those of you who it's your first time joining us, so you have an expectation of what's going to happen, we'll go through a bunch of material as we go. If you think of questions, you want to make a comment, go ahead and add it into the chat feature. And you can chat to everyone publicly, or Jason Gluskin is also going to be monitoring our chat feature, so you can chat to him directly if you'd like. I'll take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes to go through the material. We'll pause if there seem to be a lot of questions coming in at points throughout the presentation. And then at the end, we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions and answers. And we already have a few questions that have come in from participants. So we're looking forward to that conversation. As we get started here, Trusted Advisor Associates has been around this business for about 20 years. You'll see there are 3 books that have been authored by or co-authored by our founder, Charlie Green, the Trusted Advisor, Trust-Based Selling, and the Trusted Advisor Field Book with our partner, Andrea Howe. Our mission in the world is helping professionals create deeper trust relationships. We do that through workshops, online learning, custom programs, coaching. There are a variety of ways, and I'll share some resources with you at the end. So as we get started today, I'm going to ask you to bring to mind a particularly rewarding team experience. And my question to you is, what made your experience rewarding? Just go ahead and chat your reply in the chat box. Go ahead and chat to all. All right. So we're starting to see some answers. Accomplishing things as a team. Great. Thanks, Mark. Hey, Carol. Everyone's trusted each other. Yeah, the great people. A lot of team experiences are really related to the people. It's celebration at the end. That's great. Helping others accomplish their goals, celebrating victories as a team, collaborating, engaged team. So it's interesting to me to hear your responses or read your responses. So many of these responses are really tied into that relationship between the team members and how you achieve things together. Diverse talents. Hey, Wayne, if that's the Wayne I know, welcome to the webinar. It's good to see you. Trust and rapport. Yeah, really good. And a lot of these are very much focused on that experience of interacting with people. I want to present as a bit of context for you. Google about 3 years ago did a study on what makes teams work. They were specifically focused on what makes effective teams. And the result of that study showed that psychological safety was the #1 element to make teams work. So how do you get this kind of experience, right? And psychological safety, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Google Project Aristotle, is the willingness of people to take risks and feel vulnerable in front of each other. That was the key that unlocked productivity, innovation, strong team dynamics, and that takes trust. So how do you know? For a lot of us, we know kind of viscerally when we're on a team that has high trust. But how do you know when you're on a team that has low trust? And more importantly, what are the warning signs so that you can see before things get bad on the team and step in to intervene? I'm going to walk you through the 5 warning signs of low trust here. The first one is lack of productivity. And this can be seen where a team may miss milestones, it's not delivering on time, or it's not delivering on spec. The team just doesn't do what it says it will do. It's unreliable, in the words of trust. It may also be a matter of producing mediocre work, settling for what looks to be the low risk, and of getting that common lowest denominator. It chokes off innovation in the name of risk. A lot of times this can be a sign of masking jealousy, or it's an element of not invented here syndrome. I didn't come up with the idea, therefore I'm not going to support it. And then finally, a team doesn't achieve its goals. Goal failure is more significant than milestone failure writ large. It speaks to a failure of common purpose and common commitment within the team. The second warning sign of low trust is that there are subgroups and cliques that emerge in the team. You can see this in private conversations, flurries of emails and hushed conversations in the hallways when we're able to be together. It's sub-team bonding that's taking hold here. It's not even tribal. It's more of a transient, shallow, and superficial kind of bonding. Team members who are guarded in their conversations, they're very cautious about what they say and how they say it, or maybe they're concerned that somebody else will either overhear them or will get a hold of their communications. And so they tend to use language that is very carefully worded, carefully guarded. That would be in principle a bad thing. It demonstrates a lack of willingness to be transparent and to share ideas. And then finally, if you see information being hoarded as a source of political power versus being shared to create the greater team power and organizational success. The third warning sign of low trust is that a team is operating as less than the sum of its parts. A good team can accomplish so much more than just the sum of its parts. That synergy comes together to create outcomes that individually the team members can't create. They may be choking off innovation and personal growth, things that happen organically, even in a neutral social organization. Or they may be heavily influenced by those around them. A group of low trust people can even bring a strong team player down to the lower levels of trust. And then finally, you'll see turnover. If the team's bureaucratically protected, say it's got a number of highly influential central team members, then there may be low turnover amongst the core team, but any occasional newcomer to that team will turn over very quickly. If the team is in a competitive environment, it's going to show high turnover everywhere. The fourth warning sign of low trust is a faux sense of team spirit. If there's a falseness here, it's addicted to that false team spirit and happy talk. It may even be a recognized team norm to be nice to each other. And you can hear the air quotes around the word nice when people talk about it. In a team with faux team spirit, lip service is the coin of the realm, because to be honest would be to acknowledge the existence of low trust. Honesty distinguishes a critically aware team from a low trust team. And then there's frequently in these teams one particular high performer, someone who achieves great results individually, but doesn't really follow the values of the team. And this manifest unfairness results in resentment amongst the rest of the team members, although it's rarely acknowledged outright. And then finally, the fifth warning sign of low trust teams. Low trust teams have trouble collaborating at a very fundamental level. You can see this because they're likely to prefer individual compensation schemes versus a team compensation. They don't believe in or trust the ability of the team to follow through, and so they want their compensation to be dependent on their own contributions. Collaboration drives innovation, but low trust teams really exalt solo work. They put a lot of of emphasis on the solo inventor myth of innovation. And then finally, where you do see competition in low trust teams, it tends to manifest as unhealthy competition. Each team member goes out for their own good. It's like watching a pile of crabs in a barrel, scrabbling over each other's back to try to get out. So if you're seeing any of these warning signs of low trust, it could signal that your team is operating with low trust. If you're seeing multiple signs, it's almost a sure indication that you need to raise the level of trust on the team. And to do that, it's important to understand the roles of trust virtues, which are very personal ways of creating trust, and trust values, which are tools that an institution uses to create trust. I'm going to walk through those right now. But before we get into that, let's take a minute and just get a feel for what team role most of the people on the webinar are in. So I'm going to give 35 seconds. If you would just go ahead and vote for what your role is, it'll help me temper the conversation towards the audience. So it looks like we've got a really good mix, and this is good because we'll be going through some specific ways that you in your role can cultivate trust in teams. Wow, it looks like a really even split between team leaders and managers of team leaders. All right, good. Thank you very much, Jason. All right, managers of team leaders edged it out in the end. So let's dive into the trust virtues and trust values. On the one hand, we talk a lot about trust here at Trusted Advisor Associates as being very personal. Trust is an interaction between two people, and it manifests when one person takes the risk to trust and the other person demonstrates themselves to be trustworthy. And that way, trust is created. The tools that are used to create that trust are personal. They're specifically our level of trustworthiness and our willingness to trust. We refer to these as the trust virtues. The virtues of trustworthiness are the four components of trustworthiness that you can see here in the trust equation. Credibility, reliability, intimacy, and self-orientation. Credibility has to do with the words we speak. It's our subject matter expertise and our honesty and candor. In a sentence, we might say, I can trust what she says because she's always told me good news and bad news in the past. I know she's not holding anything back. Reliability has to do with actions. We might say, I know that he'll deliver on his piece of the project because he's dependable. He's never let me down in the past. Intimacy and self-orientation are more emotional aspects of trust development. Intimacy refers to the safety or security that we feel in a relationship, particularly when we're entrusting them with something, sharing information about ourselves, or taking a personal risk. We might say, I can trust her with that information. She's never violated my confidence in the past. She'd never embarrass me. That particular element of trustworthiness, intimacy, comes into play significantly in cultivating trust in a team. And in fact, you probably noticed that it's very connected to the concept of psychological safety that Google identified as the #1 element of team effectiveness. And then the final aspect of trustworthiness is self-orientation. This refers to a person's focus. In particular, whether that person's focus is primarily on him or herself or on the other person that they're interacting with. We might say something along the lines of, I really don't trust him in that deal. I don't think he really cares about me. Or maybe more commonly, I think he's really concerned about how he looks in this deal. He's not really paying attention to what I'm trying to accomplish here. Now, when it comes to the willingness of trust, It's the ability to take emotional risks and an inclination to look for or notice or create positive potential, right? We consider it virtuous for someone to tell the truth, to behave dependably, to keep confidences and be mindful of the needs of others. And we consider it virtuous for someone to be generous, to lead with generosity rather than fear when they're dealing with others. Now, on the other hand, we have to think about trust within an organizational context, where the focus is to create an environment that encourages interpersonal trust, one where people can trust and be trustworthy. The tools that enable or trust at the organizational level, the creation of an environment where people can trust and be trustworthy, are institutional tools. They're principles that guide an individual's trust behavior. We call these the trust values. The trust values, Jason, were you jumping in?
I was going to say, whenever you want to take a pause, we do have a bunch of questions already that are related to some of the things you're asking for, but we can wait till you get to a good breaking point.
Awesome. Let's do 2 more slides. I'm just about through the virtues and values, and then we'll take a pause and answer some questions.
Great.
Thanks, Jason. The values of trust are found in the trust principles. And these are 4 trust principles that act as guideposts for trust creating behavior. They're laid out here. You may have additional values that your organization adopts to create trust. These are 4 that we find are simple and relatively comprehensive to create trust building behavior. They're simply these: a focus on the other for the other's sake, not to achieve a personal means or ends. Simply stated, this just says you're on the same side of the table as your team members all the time. Secondly, taking a collaborative approach to relationships. We're mentally always together with the other person and forwarding the joint goals or the goals of the team in a collaborative approach. Third, having a medium to long-term relationship perspective, not a transactional focus. Having a transactional focus is the quickest way to kill off a relationship, whereas having a relationship focus, just like nurturing a tree, bears the fruit of strong transactions over time. And then finally, the 4th trust virtue or trust value, the 4th principle, is a habit of being transparent in all your dealings. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this principle, and that is where injurious or illegal for someone. We may find that contractual obligations or legal concerns limit the amount of information we can share. And then obviously, we would never want to be transparent for the sake of hurting someone. Brutal candor is definitely not considered to be a virtue. So those are the trust virtues and the trust values. Now, bringing these together in the team, a team sits between these 2 constructs, the personal trust that we develop one-on-one and the organizational need to create an environment of trust. And that adds complexity into the situation. Now, instead of working one-on-one or from working at an abstract level, we're deep into personal relationships with multiple people. Typically, teams are created with a sense of heterogeneity. And I'm not talking about diversity per se, I'm talking about backgrounds. People come from different business units within the organization. They may have their own language. If you've ever been in a meeting between a salesperson and a highly technical person, sometimes that literally gets in the way of their ability to talk to each other. And then finally, there's complexity around goal alignment. I have my own personal goals to achieve. I have to take into consideration the needs of my business unit, and we're coming together as a team to achieve something. So all of these complexities cause us to want to bring together both the trust virtues and the trust values when we cultivate trust in teams. Just to reiterate, the virtues of trust are highly personal, and they involve your level of trustworthiness and your willingness to trust. The values of trust, on the other hand, are institutional. They're principles that guide the relationships in the organizations, the processes and structures. Both the virtues and values have to come into play in teams. Jason, I'm going to pause there and take a break.
Yep.
Take a breath. What are some of the questions that we're getting on the chat?
Well, the first one, you covered it in a variety of ways, but you might want to just highlight it again, is why is psychological safety trumped over other factors in terms of the best team environment? So I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to highlight any of the things you talked about. And then I have a question related to that as well.
Well, let's start with that one because it's a great question. And I think I'm not one of the authors of the Google study of Project Aristotle. So I think the research behind it was more of a correlation, right? They went through and asked a number of team members and team leaders about their experiences on high performance teams. And so it's more explanatory from the Project Aristotle perspective. From a trust perspective, we know, looking at the trust equation and comparing it to our own data with the trust quotient, that the highest correlation between high trustworthiness comes from the element of trust that is intimacy. And intimacy is all about creating that psychological safety. When you think about it, it has to do with the reciprocal nature of a trust relationship, that if I create safety for someone to take a risk, to step forward with a new idea, to go out on a limb with recommending a course of action, those are the times when the project is going to move forward. And if that psychological safety doesn't exist, if the team members feel that they can't share their ideas, they can't innovate because they'll be chastised if they're wrong, they'll be punished if they don't have the right answer, they'll be disregarded, their voice won't be heard, that's when we start to stifle innovation on teams. So that's the connection between psychological safety. I do want to point out now there is a lot of material out in the ether about effective teams. Personally, I'm a fan of Lencioni, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. We're very specifically focused on cultivating trust in a team. There are certainly other factors that impact team effectiveness. Jason?
Yeah, and then there's another related question from somebody else. So what if you work for a team that has low psychological safety or within an organization, and you choose to be trusting, but obviously, when you do that, other people will advance themselves or not give you credit, not collaborate with you. You can use your trust, but you'll be used and hurt. How do you operate in an environment like that?
Yeah, that's God, what a tough situation to be in, right? To be doing everything that you can to cultivate trust and not have that reciprocated. It's hard. And I'd say I am going to go ahead and move on to the next slide because it has to do with strategy, the first strategy to cultivate trust in teams. And that is continue living the trust virtues, right? Now, it may be, there's a lot of self-awareness that's required to truly demonstrate trustworthiness. We have a tendency in professional services to over-rely on the rational elements of trustworthiness, the credibility and the reliability. And as such, we leave intimacy with short shrift. We don't focus the energy and attention on creating that sense of safety. The good news with cultivating trust, unlike, if you think about it, unlike traditional change management projects, is that trust doesn't have to be generated from a more senior level or from within a hierarchy. Trust can be generated by us, by every individual. We have incredible personal agency to create trust. So for someone who's been in an experience where they're trusting and being trustworthy and they're not seeing that come back, I would say first assess your own trustworthiness. And that's not as binary as you think. I'm not saying you either are or are not trustworthy, but really try to understand how you demonstrate trustworthiness. and whether or not it's the best way for you to develop trust in that situation. Continue taking personal responsibility and lead by example. Even if the other people on the team aren't acting in trustworthy ways, if you continue to act in trustworthy ways and continue to take the risk to trust, then you should see an increase in, in trust in that relationship. And that's the other side of this. Remember, a trust relationship is two-sided. You have to both be trustworthy and you have to take the risk to trust the other person. If you're having a hard time, and I can see in a situation like that where it would be difficult to trust other people if they've already demonstrated that they'll behave in untrustworthy ways. And so the one thing I caution is to be aware that you're assessing the risk realistically. We tend in professional services to think about risk as to overestimate the amount of risk. And so we get so concerned with not doing something that could be wrong, we end up not doing anything. And a potential risk of commission, doing the wrong thing, becomes a risk of omission, the risk of not doing what's right. Right? And that's all connected into our sense of personal risk. And then finally, to make it a little easier, use the language of risk taking in order to help you take those risks. I'll show you just briefly what it is. It's a skill that we call name it and claim it. It's a great technique for saying difficult truths or bringing a difficult conversation to the table. And it's simply this, it's 4 short steps. Number 1, understand truly what the issue is. What is it that needs to be said that you're not saying? Secondly, and do this to yourself, list all of your concerns. What's holding you back from saying it? I might look foolish, or they might be upset or angry if I share that information with them. Third, turn those concerns into caveats, right? And the easiest caveat that I can think of is just 4 short words, at the risk of, right? So put it all together. For example, wow, at the risk of looking foolish, I've lost track of what the original question was. Could we take a step back and refocus? So that's the language of risk taking. Jason, were there other questions or should?
I think that's good for now. There's 1 or 2 we can save to the end.
Great. We're definitely going to have time for question and answer at the end. So strategy number 2, design for the trust values, right? In a team situation, bring the trust values in. The trust virtues are highly personal. And those are things that we individually can do. The trust values, remember, are institutional. And so they need to be intentionally built into the team operations. You can put them in as part of your team charter. Use them to design your meeting agendas, right? Set aside explicitly time to talk about trust, progress assessments. Don't just assess how much trust do we have, but assess whether or not we're creating trust in the progress. And secondly, this came from, we've had a lot of questions lately from people asking, how do we operate more effectively in a virtual environment to build trust? And creating a shared workspace is a great way to drive up the intimacy, right? And if you have the option to be in person, which hopefully we all soon will again, then it's literally a shared meeting room, a place where you can come together in person. Even if it's virtual though, take advantage of the tools that are out there. I know a lot of our clients are using Microsoft Teams, where you can create specifically team rooms with communications that are dedicated and places to store materials. And that's the second point here. It's not just a shared workspace for the individuals to come together. It's a shared workspace for the work product. If you think about it, that'll help with collaboration. It helps with transparency. It helps with being focused on the other because you can see what each other are working on. And then finally, the third strategy, and this is talk about trust. For those of you who have seen the movie Fight Club, right, the number 1 rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Well, in trust, the number 1 rule about trust is you do talk about trust. Use the language of trust. Make it simple and consistent in your messages. And then reinforce constantly your commitment to the trust values and the trust virtues. Storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool in talking about trust. Stories tend to be much more meaningful and memorable because people see their own selves in the stories, and they can really they can be inspired and they can find their own insights. And frankly, as adults, as professionals, you know, we all have a little bit of the teenager left in us. Nobody likes being told what to do. And so storytelling is a way of sharing the values of trust and talking about the behaviors of trust that are less prescriptive. They provide an opportunity for individuals to respond. The final piece about talking about trust is be open to constructive conflict. Right? It's important that the team create mutual accountability. And that means rather than choosing to say nothing, if there's behavior or if there's interaction that isn't appropriate to the team norms, choose to have the conflict constructively. One of the resources that I'll be sending out after this webinar is actually an ebook that we have that talks about exactly how to have constructive conflict. But sweeping problems under the rug is never a sign of a high trust team. Being able to talk openly about trust always is. So I'm going to briefly share with you how to apply the strategies based on your roles. Most of the people, a slight majority, are in a team leader role. And so as you apply these three strategies, it's important to remember that in the role of team leader, it's vital that you role model the behaviors, both the trust virtues, being trustworthy and taking the willingness to trust others, and the values. Demonstrate what it's like to be transparent, demonstrate what collaboration means in your environment. Set the expectations. You can do this through design, and you can do it through talking about trust, through having conversations again and again. And then finally, encourage mutual accountability. As a leader, it is your responsibility to encourage the team members to develop trust between themselves as well as with you. If you're a team member, the focus becomes much more personal. It's on that personal accountability towards demonstrating the trust virtues, being trustworthy, taking the personal risks, and always continuing to use those values as guideposts when you select your behavior. And then finally, if you're a manager of team leaders, it's more of a supportive role if you're not directly engaged in the team. And so consider how, as the manager of a team leader, you can yourself role model the trust virtues and adherence to the trust values to your employees who are team leaders. Again, setting expectations a level removed, the expectations of how they will manage the team in a way that cultivates trust. And that third piece, talking about trust. I cannot emphasize that enough. So, Jason, that's the end of where we are in the formal work,
Yep.
in the formal slides.
There's one more question which you answered, is how do you establish trust virtually? I do want to mention that recent blog post that Charlie wrote with Sandy and Stuart of some tactics in the COVID world. I don't know if you want to direct people to that, or would you like me to?
We'll send that out as a resource afterwards, and thank you for raising that point, Jason. Charlie Green, our founder of Trusted Advisor Associates, along with two of our colleagues, Sandy Steyer and Stuart Hirsch, wrote a fantastic blog about a week and a half ago on building trust virtually. You know, it's important, and you'll notice in all of these strategies and all of the skills, the virtues and the values, while they apply equally for in-person or virtual teams. It may be more difficult to do some things when you're working virtually because we lose so much of the interaction that comes from being face-to-face. but there are definitely strategies. Things like, for those of you who have your cameras on, thank you, big thumbs up. Um, just seeing each other, being human when you're interacting virtually. But there's a blog post, and we will send it out with the follow-up email.
There is another question that just came in. Somebody asked, what should be avoided by a new leader to be trustworthy who's coming from outside the organization? So, yeah,
Say it one more time. Let me make sure I understood it. Jason?
what should be avoided by a new leader to be
So what
trustworthy?
shouldn't you do,
Yeah.
especially when you're coming in? So there are a couple of things. First of all, I go back to the trust virtues. Always start with that personal accountability of the trust virtues and being trustworthy. Specifically for a new leader who's coming in from the outside, um, credibility and reliability are they're a bar, right? They're necessary but insufficient to create trust. So be sure that you're modeling your credibility and reliability in ways that matter to the new organization, right? We've all been there with a new boss who comes in, and the first 6 months they're there, all they talk about is how they used to do it back at their old organization, right? Or they're dismissive or look down on how things are done in the new organization. So just be aware of your role relative to that organization. The second thing I'll say is way overdue intimacy building and managing your self-orientation. Anytime you're new to a situation, the chances are that your self-orientation is going to be high. You're going to be focused on yourself because you're worried. You don't know how you're being perceived. You're not sure what the right way to act is. And that's natural. Do whatever you need to do to manage your self-orientation and maintain the focus on the new organization that you've stepped into. And then pump up the intimacy. And that can be done in ways like demonstrating your vulnerability, right? Just a simple statement that says, listen, I recognize that I'm new here and I may not have the full picture. It feels like this is the way to go. Or, wow, it's taking me some time to get my feet under me, right? Those are great intimacy builders. Another good intimacy builder is to acknowledge something that you appreciate about someone. And in a new situation, it may be as simple as, boy, I really appreciated how much they listened to you. You clearly have the ear of very influential people here. And then the last technique I'll suggest as a new person, it's the fastest way to create intimacy, is listen. Listen well and listen with empathy. Really try to understand where the other person is coming from. Listening is such a gift, and giving someone else the gift of being listened to can create that connection and creates that sense of psychological safety. Jason?
That's it for the. There's one more question that just came in. Do you want to cover the resources and we can cover the last question?
Let's do the resources real quickly. We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that everybody sees the resources that are available to them, and then we'll come back for that final question.
Okay.
So Trusted Advisor resources, and this is just a bit of an about us plug, so forgive any crass commercialization here. There's a ton of information on our website, and it's all free and readily available to you. We have podcasts, blogs, ebooks, videos. And I do want to highlight that on July 28th, at 11 a.m., Charlie Green is going to be back in front of you with another webinar on why sell is not a four-letter word. Of course, if you want to do some self-study, we have the 3 books that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. And then we also have an online resource for self-paced courses called Trusted Advisor 24/7. You can reach that at the URL that's on the page. Any of you who have not experienced Trusted Advisor in the past, if you're curious about your own trustworthiness and your own tendencies on how you build trust, highly recommend that you take our online quiz, the Trust Quotient. There's a free version that has a mini report that will highlight your strengths and areas of opportunities, or there's an opportunity to pay for a fuller version. And that can be accessed through our website. And then finally, join the conversation. Join us on social media. You'll get trust tips, memes, nice reminders of building trust and how to cultivate trust in all areas of your life. With that, Jason, is there?
And you know what? While I have everybody, why don't we launch the last poll?
Oh, sure. We'll do one more poll and then we'll take questions while you all are answering it.
So the question obviously is, what did you think of the webinar? Feel free to answer the poll. And the question is, what can you do to overcome a person's lack of willingness to engage? This person may have a track record of ignoring or being extremely slow to respond to emails and requests.
Yeah, you know, that's hard, right? Because everything I've been talking about when it comes to the virtues of trust is about your own personal accountability and agency to create trust. And when you're in a situation where the other person just isn't doing what they committed to, it's tough. That's one of those areas I think that's ripe for constructive conflict. And in a situation like that, if it's truly a situation where the other person isn't following through on their commitments or they're exhibiting some behavior that doesn't drive trust, I'd say it's probably time to have a tough conversation. That skill, name it and claim it, to really understand what's holding you back from that conversation. Like, first, get in touch with why it feels difficult for you. In a constructive conflict, you have to go a little further than just being focused on you, right? All of the virtues of trust come into play. So also take some time and be empathetic. Try to understand what's happening to them, what might be behind it, and be open that there are possibly situations that you're just not aware of. And then engage with them. Have the conversation. It feels uncomfortable. It feels risky. You may not even feel it's your place. Nobody ever wants to be in the role of tattletale, having to go to a boss or go to a team leader and say so-and-so is not doing their job. So I strongly encourage you to take personal accountability, not only for your own trustworthiness, but for having that constructive conflict to be transparent and talk about trust. I hope that answered the question. Jason, we are at time. Is there anything else? We're actually a minute over.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting. I think we all learned a lot. If anybody has questions, we're going to get an email. Everyone's going to get an email with the resources, the video, and a variety of other materials after this. So, Noelle, I don't know if you want to close it off.
All right. Just to say thank you very much. It was great seeing all of you. I appreciate for those of you who were on camera. And we'll see you again on July 28th. Have a great day, everybody. I'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody wants to stay and continue the conversation. So thank you very much.
Hi, Noelle. Just wanted to say hello. This is Larry.
Hey, Larry. Is that Larry Cook?
Oh, Larry Green. Long time ago at CSC.
Larry Green. Hi. Wow. Sorry you haven't popped up. There you are. Nice to see your face.
Yeah, same here.
So Wayne Bailey was on as well. I don't know if that's our Wayne Bailey.
Yeah, he said
Wayne.
yes, it was.
It's me. How are you doing?
Sorry, I want to make sure we don't turn this into a CSC reunion.
Great to see you, albeit virtually.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. Love connecting with you guys.
Yeah, good to see you for sure.
Yeah. Any
Wait,
questions from anyone else in the audience? Jason, are folks still muted?
I don't see any new questions. I think we covered all of them. So.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. Then it's back to the Dirk. Did you have a question? I see you're still hanging out.
No, not really.
Fantastic.
It was good. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Wayne, Larry, it's nice to see your smiling faces. Appreciate you coming to support.
certainly.
You know,
Big believer in trusted advisor. I live by it.
yeah, I got my start back at CSC with you guys.
I remember that.
No?
Hey, I want to take a quick second. I want to follow back, Garang, and I apologize. I'm probably brutalizing your name. I did want to point out that question about a new leader coming in. Charlie Green actually suggested it's a fantastic suggestion, is to make sure that you do a listening tour, right? So as a new leader coming into the organization, focus specifically on some time to go around and engage with the new organization as listening, not sharing your view, not going out and saying, here's what I'm going to do to change, but really just giving them an opportunity to share their point of view with you. Charlie, thank you for tossing that in. I think I got everything.
All righty. Take care, Noelle. I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Nice seeing you, Wayne. Thanks.
All righty.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Jason, I think that's about it. Bye, Dirk. Thanks for joining.